of respecting the dignity of our citizens and one another, of working together towards shared progress, and searching for the wisdom that only you can give in these special ways. God bless each and every one here, whether citizen or council member or first responder, and God, give us all that we need to serve you for this great community. It's in your holy and precious name that we ask for your wisdom and presence tonight. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved unanimously. Item number 4 is a public hearing to receive input on the proposed municipal budget for the 2021 fiscal year. Ms. Kotoff will read that, and please bear with me. I'm required at the end of the public hearing to hit the gavel, but that does not mean to get up and leave, that the rest of the meeting is over. Ms. Kotoff.
Yes, sir. This is a public hearing pursuant to Section 6-1-80 of the South Carolina Code of Laws of the Town of Mount Pleasant's proposed municipal bond budget and then for fiscal year 2021. The proposed budget is in the amount of $112,473,303 and is based on the current millage rate of 38.1 mils for operating, 2.9 mils for debt, for a total of 41 mils.
Did anyone sign up to speak to that particular portion of the public hearing? If so, you may come speak now. No public comment on the public hearing for the budget. There being none, this public hearing is closed. This moves us to item B, which is recognition of the U12 tackle football state champions. Will we be going around?
Mayor, if you and members of council will join me out front, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is one of my favorite things to do as chairman of the Recreation Committee for the town. As you know, we periodically have our young folks come up and honor them for winning state championships, which is extremely important in all kinds of things, and athletics as well. So with no further ado, this is our Mount Pleasant 12U All-Star team. Head coach is Chris Switcher. Assistant coaches Kevin Berry, Sean Belcher, and Bubba Reynolds. I'm going to read their record to let you know how well they've done throughout this whole state championship run. On November 19th, they beat Charleston County 19-0 at Park West. On November 23rd, they beat Orangeburg 30-0 at Orangeburg. December 2nd, they beat the city of Charleston 22-8 at Park West for the district championship. December 7th, beat Dillon 28-6 at Park West for the lower state championship. And December 14th, beat Malden 22-0 at Waccamaw High School for the state championship. This all-star team went 5-0 through the postseason, outscoring their competition by a combined total of 121-14. I think that deserves a big round of applause. So we're honored to have them up here today to be recognized by the mayor and our town council. This time I'd like to have Coach Swisher come up and say a few words. Coach?
Thank you, Gary. Still upset about those 2 touchdowns we let go. So, but it's nice to carry on the tradition. Gary, I know you had some state championship teams as well. So great that we can be back here. One of the things that I want to recognize most about how great these kids are is that we did something really cool this year with, we included Colton Bruce. Colton, you want to raise your hand and say hi to everybody? He's one of our Special Olympics and Unified athletes, and we included him during the regular season, and he was not an equipment manager. He was not a token player, but he actually got into a game and scored his very first touchdown. So very proud of Colton. Also, I want to recognize Dominic Fazio as well, too. He's a great little helper on our team as well, too. But I really appreciate the opportunity to stand up here and recognize these boys. They worked really hard. And beyond that, they're just great kids. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Coach. I also like to take this opportunity to recognize Jay Rhodes, who runs our football program for the town. I don't know if Jay's here or not. If he is, please stand up, be recognized, Jay. I know you love exposure, so hey, come on up and bring the sign up with you, Jay. We'll get a good picture.
Let's get a photo. We'll get the sign up front, and Jay, you're in this with us as well, too.
Yeah.
So Dominic and Colton, why don't you guys up front? All the big, yeah. You guys, Trevor. Also, too, we have 3 casts on hands that didn't happen in tackle football.
Now move over so you can get in the picture.
Hold the cast up.
Move over here so you can get the picture, because you
We got 2 broken thumbs and a broken hand. It did not happen in tackle football. So, yeah. Bubba and Kevin.
You can't see me and Mr. Chapman back here.
We didn't play. I could have, but
Yeah.
that was a long time ago.
We got a couple more calls.
Something more coming? Alright. I think you have to squeeze it a tiny bit tighter. There we go. Alright, good.
Great, thank you.
His hands.
Fist bumps, fist bumps, fist bumps. Good job. Didn't you get the big award a little while ago? Good job, Dominic. Good job.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, next item on the agenda is the American Red Cross Month proclamation. If I could invite up the Executive Director, Ashley Henyon, as well as Andy Kavode, who is a current board member. Thank you for being here tonight. I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas, March is American Red Cross Month, a time when we recognize the humanitarian organization that eases people's suffering during life's emergencies in Low-Country, South Carolina, across the United States and around the world. The Palmetto, South Carolina region of the American Red Cross has a long history of helping our neighbors in need by delivering shelter, care, and hope during large-scale disasters, making our community safer through its life-saving Home Fire campaign, providing life-saving blood, teaching skills, and save lives, and supporting military, veterans, and their families. During this Red Cross Month, we thank and honor the selfless volunteers, dedicated employees, and generous supporters who make this compassionate work possible. And whereas, last year in the Low Country, nearly 800 volunteers assisted more than 1,300 people after local emergencies like home fires. Meanwhile, when large-scale disasters like Hurricane Dorian devastated families, hundreds of disaster workers from South Carolina were among the nearly 9,000 Red Cross workers, 90% of them volunteers, who left their homes to work alongside partners to provide refuge, food, relief items, emotional support, recovery planning, and other assistance. And whereas, meanwhile, the Red Cross continues to work with its partners to prevent fire tragedies through its National Home Fire campaign, which installed its 2 millionth free smoke alarm last year and has saved hundreds of lives across the country and 76 in South Carolina since the campaign launched in 2014. Last year in the Low Country, the Red Cross and local partners installed nearly 3,500 free smoke alarms and made nearly 1,000 households safer from the threat of home fires. Whereas, additionally, in the Low Country, the Red Cross provided nearly 4,200 case services to U.S. service members. Veterans and their families collected more than 30,400 units of life-saving blood and trained more than 8,300 people in life-saving skills like first aid and CPR. And whereas, every day, people in our community depend on the American Red Cross, whose life-saving mission is powered by the devotion of volunteers, the generosity of donors, and the partnerships of community organizations. We dedicate this month of March to all those who support its vital work to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. Now, therefore, on behalf of Mayor Will Haney, Mayor of the Town of Mount Pleasant, do hereby proclaim March 2020 as American Red Cross Month. If I could provide this to you all. Would you like to say a few words first? Okay.
Thank you so much. A lot of stats in there, and you can tell that we are just very, very busy at the Red Cross, but everything that we do is only possible because of our community partners. So thank you for helping us get those services to people in need and for getting life-saving blood to patients that need it. Thank you.
We have some longevity awards to give out to some wonderful employees. Mr. Peel, will you come forward and do that for us? Thank you.
Henry Whitesides, please come forward. Henry, come over here and stand on my left side for me, please. That's my better side. Mayor Haney and members of council, it's my pleasure to recognize Henry Whitesides for 25 years of service. Henry began working with the town on March the 27th, 1995 as a laborer for our Facilities and Grounds Division. In November of 1999, he was promoted to a vehicle operator after obtaining his commercial driver's license. And in January 2001, he was promoted to the Grounds and Event Specialist, a position which he still holds today. Henry is responsible for maintaining ball fields and parks for our grounds division. His team player attitude and work ethic are evident through his crew and their productivity. He has extensive knowledge of his job, and he's known for his dependability and dedication. Over the years, Henry has been recognized numerous times by the community for a job well done. His attention to detail delivers results that surpass town standards. Henry has a reputation for taking great care of his division's equipment, ensuring all preventive maintenance is administered. In 2019, he was named the Public Services August Safety Employee for the month. Henry, thank you for 25 years of service. The town is fortunate to have you as an employee. Would Dave Behrens please come forward? This is it's almost like a privilege, I guess you could say, is to be able to recognize Dave for 35 years of service. feel like I was in diapers when he started. But it's good to be able to do this for Dave. Dave started his career with the town on March 11th, 1985 with the Recreation Department, excelled up through the ranks for several years. In 1992, he transferred to the Public Service Department and served as a senior foreman in the Facilities and Grounds Division for 2 years. He was then promoted to a division chief for Infrastructure Division, and finally transferred to the Waste Management Division chief in 1996, a position that he still holds today and does a heck of a job. Dave's high standards and work ethics are evidenced through the accomplishments and the consistent outstanding service for our entire community. He has been commended by other agencies for the way he manages division during regular collection and especially during storm events. His knowledge, leadership skills, and commitment to employees has been recognized and appreciated by every division within the Public Service Department. To receive a CDL driver's license is an 8-week course that can cost thousands of dollars through a technical college, and which is normally required. However, as to today, 73 employees have received their CDL license through Dave's training at no cost to the town and no cost to the employee. He is a lifetime resident of Mount Pleasant and has served our wonderful town for 35 years. Dave is currently the longest tenured employee at the town and volunteers yearly for Recreation Department as a youth basketball coach. Here's a important one. He has never used a day of sick leave in 35 years. It's been an honor working with you all these years. Thank you for everything you've done and will continue to do. Congratulations on 35 years with the town.
Thank you. I wasn't sure.
This brings us to item 5 on our agenda, which is approval of minutes from the January 28th, 2020 Town Council Retreat, the February 11, 2020 Town Council Meeting, and the February 2020 Financial Statement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve these 3 minutes as distributed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Item number 6 is public comment. We ask you to come forward, give your name, address. You have 2 minutes. Please obey the sign there. And we ask if you have a handout, a new procedure that we have worked in coordination with our police and public safety and everybody involved, is to please hand it to the sergeant at arms. Please do not bring it directly to the dais.
Mr.
Thank
Mayor,
you.
can I
Yes,
ask, how many public comments do we have? Can I ask how many speakers there are?
25 about, sir.
Okay.
And there's,
Lewis Horton, 138 Live Oak Drive. I do not have any comments, but I email town council members, and just here to reiterate and seek your support for the proposed encroachment permit as recommended by the Transportation Committee for the dock at 101 Mary Street. The circumstances are truly unique. There was a dock there. Hugo took it away. I guess what the Lord giveth, he can take it away, but I would hope town council would let him keep it. Several permits in the interim have been granted, and without the issue of an encroachment over a section of marsh, which is de minimis, only a few square feet under a revised dock plan, probably less than 0.5% of the square footage of the dock. It would enable the Ravenel family, which has owned this property for 50 years, to perpetuate their heritage on that site. Thank you very much.
I'm going to go ahead and call two at a time, please, given the number of speakers. The first person I call, please come forward, and the next person will be on deck. Clyde DeBrew and Joe Bustos.
My name is Clyde DeBrew, 512 Johnny Dodds Boulevard, the Miller Cadillac property, and I'm here on behalf of the Miller family and the citizens of Mount Pleasant. My request today is no longer the request of my past 3 appearances before the different boards. My request is a compromise between what I initially requested and what is being proposed. The world is full of compromises. I am now asking for you to compromise your final proposal. This week, the Miller Cadillac has again lost a contract for building on the property. I might say it's the 4th loss of contract. This is a result of discussion with town personnel regarding the mandates. It was not feasible to build on the present property with present and potential variances. It is not fair to the community of Mount Pleasant for this gateway parcel to be an eyesore. 8 years, almost 9, is unreasonable. Please allow a 65-foot height limit to enable potential development. Thank you.
And Martha Jane Walker, if you'd come up next behind Mr. Bustos.
This seems odd. Joe Bustos, 649 King Street here in Mount Pleasant. Thank you for having me today. Again, I want to congratulate all the newly elected members of council. As many of you may know, Mike Stilley, representative for District 112, has decided that he does not want to run again for the State House. I live in that district, so last week I decided that I would run, and I intend to run, and the primary will be on the 9th of June. I think I stand in good stead with going to the State House because of all the things I've learned in Mount Pleasant. And I've talked to folks at Sullivan's Island as well as Isle of Palms, and many of our issues are the same. So with that, I want to say if you have ideas, if you have suggestions, if you would, please call, let me know how I can help. And that's what I want to do. Thank you very much, and I'll give you back a minute. Thank you.
And Edward Coquier DeFurro, please excuse my mispronunciation if that occurred, is next, please. Ms. Walker.
Hi. Martha Jane Walker and my daughter Strom. I apologize. No disrespect to anyone who's here with me today. Homeowner at 958 Key Colony Court. You know why we are here today. You'll hear from others of us, and we're no strangers to the issues of the zoning of Sullivan's Point. In the last board meeting, your concerns and sympathy were greatly appreciated. However, I am deeply concerned of the lack of movement to find a resolution, a complete resolution. As a reminder, Martha Jane Walker, single mom of Strom, here with me tonight. I'm selling my home to accommodate the needs of my parents and their health issues. My home has been on the market for over 150 days now. I specifically use the word sympathy and not empathy. Sympathy is the feeling of compassion, sorrow, or pity for the hardships that another person encounters. Thank you for that. We really appreciate your sympathy in the last meeting. However, empathy is putting yourself in the shoes of another. So tonight, I'll share with you what being in my shoes has been like for the past 4 weeks, and the lack of resolution has meant to me, my daughter, and my family. 4 weeks. 3 weeks ago, my mother had 2 heart surgeries. Not 1, 2. Her recovery could not take place in my home because my home is on the market to meet the needs of her and her needs
for her health. And my mother could not recover in my home and had to stay in a hotel for a week and a half. I've had 13 showings since the 4 weeks that we've been here. Oh, that's great, Martha Jane, you've had 13 showings. No one will make an offer on my home because we have to disclose the zoning issues. 13 hours of showings in my home. My child has in-home health care, not health care, I work in health care, benefit focus, child care, and I have to displace my child from my home for every showing. I keep my home on the market because you guys had shared with us that you had intentions to resolve the issues that were at hand that were keeping us from being able to sell our homes and to live normal lives. So I look for a resolution tonight and for my fellow neighbors to provide the solution to this issue that you guys will provide tonight. Thank you.
Annie Henderson.
Edward Coach DeFaro, 950 Key Colony Court. I'm head up the homeowners association, and I get calls from Martha Jane and all the other 23 neighbors every week about this issue. We're asking to pass what's on the agenda. And I understand the issues with the overlay. Mayor, you mentioned it last meeting. The problems of putting this back in place. All we're asking is, and that resolution, that ordinance that you're talking about doing to grandfather, that's great, we welcome it. But I've talked to your own staff, I've talked to legal experts. This is not a trivial matter. It's gonna take 6 months, maybe 12 months to put this together in a coherent way that you guys can vote on, while we have people like Mary Jane that have to wait. So all we're asking is, this city council, you guys represent the current and the past. The past city council approved this. So you represent the city council. You represent those members that passed it before. Just approve what you approved already one time before. Give us this overlay just under our pieces of property until that ordinance is passed. It allows us to grandfather in. That gives people like Martha Jane and others certainty that they can, move on with their lives. This has been a real issue for us and a real issue for a lot of people. I can go on, but please consider this. It really is affecting people's lives. And we're not the only development. There's two streets down from us, same exact thing. They just don't know about it yet. Their homeowner called me the other day, because they got on the market, they found out about it. And they called me, and I said, I gave them all this information that we've been doing. It's a real issue that is affecting people's lives. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Annie Henderson, 72 Jane Jacobs Street. I'm here with Catherine Templeton, and tonight we're representing the PTSO for Lucy Beckham High School. I'd like to start by reading you a letter. Ladies and gentlemen, we are residents of Mount Pleasant. We would like to ask for your support for Lucy Beckham High School's access to sports facilities. The 1,500 Lucy Beckham High School zone families are specifically asking for a partnership with the town of Mount Pleasant to provide access to tennis, baseball, and swimming facilities, which are all located within direct proximity to the new high school. The Wando South baseball field is located directly across the road from Beckham's campus, and the community's longtime expectation has been that it would be available when the new high school is finished. The hope is to see this field designated for use by Beckham students, as was the agreement when Wando occupied the site. Furthermore, it seems to be a given for the Beckham swim team to have the same opportunities the Wando swimmers enjoy. Since the Park West pool is made available for Wando students, the R.L. Jones Center could similarly provide an appropriate location for the Beckham team. Similar expectations exist for tennis, with the hope that the arrangement can be made for the courts on Whipple Road to be made accessible to students. Thank you for your willingness to represent our town. This is a difficult job, and we look forward to seeing the town of Mount Pleasant and Lucy Beckham High School working together to ensure that all of our kids have access to sports facilities, as it is an integral part of their high school experience.
Can we start the next 2 minutes? Thank you. Hi, Catherine Templeton. 5 days ago, after the Education Committee meeting, a group of us realized that we needed to start a letter writing campaign on Facebook. Now, keep in mind, we don't have a list of who lives in Mount Pleasant or who's going to Lucy Beckham High School. Our Facebook page is about 3 weeks old, and we don't even have money in the budget to promote a post. So imagine our surprise when we got started, and in one day, we got 122 signatures that support what Annie just read to you. Now, 122 may not sound like a lot, but 122 is more than the number of votes that decided this last town council election. So instead of, out of respect for you, inundating your email with 122 emails for all of you, we waited until tonight, 5 days later, to bring you 375 signatures, actually more than 375 signatures, from people who support what Annie just read to you. And here's our ask. As you look at this budget for this town, we ask that after critical infrastructure, you prioritize Lucy Beckham High School. You prioritize the 3,000 voters, the 3,000 taxpayers, the 3,000 residents whose 1,500 kids are going to go to that zoned neighborhood public school right down the street. And our ask is that the pristine academic facilities that CCSD has given to us are matched by pristine, intuitive, across the street sports facilities for our children. People are moving here for this school. Ask your real estate agent friends. People want to be zoned for Beckham. So we really look forward to the work that the town and CCSD will do together, and if we can be of any help, we are here to help. It's our expectation that Lucy Beckham will be prioritized. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
We don't do responses.
No, I'm not.
Public comment.
Yeah, I'm not responding. I'm just saying that they have not come to the Recreation Committee. I think that's the committee they probably should have come to, and I'll be willing to put that on our next committee agenda for them to come and let's discuss it at the Recreation. I think you went to the Education Committee, and you should have come to our committee first. So I'll be happy to put you guys on there and talk to you about it.
Thank you. Back to public comment, please.
Hamlin O'Kelly first and Molly Fair.
Good evening, Hamlin O'Kelly, 652 Coleman Boulevard. My friend Lewis Horton took away most of what I was going to tell you about the item 9 for the action on the Transportation Committee. I'm standing here with Ms. Fair, who owns 101 Mary Street. Some of you who were at the Transportation Committee meeting heard the arguments in favor of your allowing staff to approve an encroachment permit for Ms. Fair's dock application. The history of the dock is a long one. Those of you who are at Transportation heard it. OCRM has approved a dock corridor for this section of property in the village, but because there is a small speck of land that belongs to the end of the Hibben Street right-of-way, Ms. Fair needs an encroachment permit from you all. I would just urge you to take the same action that the Transportation Committee took. Thank you.
I'm just here to put a face to the name that you're all going to hear about. And also to say, as I think Lewis said, I'm a second generation in this house, and it's passing on to the third generation for a total of 50 years. So we have some long roots in this community, and there was a dock there back prior to Hugo also. But because of those roots, I've had wonderful support from my neighbors, and I appreciate that hugely. Early on, the old village group heard from 11 neighbors, and somewhere in your email stacks, you heard from them again, and I appreciate that very much, and I want to ask you to support the resolution from the Transportation Committee on my behalf. Thank you.
Sarah Carey and Carl Nichols.
Hello, I'm Sarah Carey, 609 Pitt Street. Just following the previous two comments, I would just like to tell you that I've been following and supporting this dock application at 101 Mary Street for some time, and that I really hope that now the whole town council will adopt the recommendations of the Transportation Committee, which would allow the staff to approve the encroachment permit that was applied for by the owner of the property, 101 Mary Street. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Nichols?
Good evening, council members. My name is Carl Nichols III, and I'm a lifelong resident taxpayer of Mount Pleasant. My family and I grew up here, and we want nothing but the best for our youth in Mount Pleasant. That being said, I was made aware of a social media post sent out by Councilman Rambo in regards to a new sports complex. From what I have read and been told about the project, there seems to be some lack of transparency regarding voting for and funding of this project. There are multiple sports complexes in the town of Mount Pleasant, Park West, R.L. Jones Center, and Town Hall that all need updating and facility management. The original plan for the Carolina Park Sports Complex was much needed baseball fields along with fields for other sports. Athletic fields are needed by residents and schools. Please consider going back to the original well-thought-out plan. I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you as a council. With the estimated total project costing $7 million, Oceanside Academy is proposing to contribute $1.2 million to build the stadium seating from what was released in Jake Rambo's tweet. This contribution from Oceanside would be less than a sixth of the estimated total project cost. Is their school branding going to be put on this artificial field, turf? Also, why a turf field? A grass field would save the town and taxpayers $500,000 during installation and would not require the turf to be replaced every 5 to 10 years with year-round use. Also, with Oceanside Academy using the facilities on weekdays until 5:15 all night on Fridays and all day Saturdays, is the town paying to maintain the stadium and turf after their use? Will there be an additional recurring maintenance cost for use and upkeep of the facilities? For a project that costs so much, between $5 to $6 million of taxpayer funding, where is the community involvement come from on this project other than Oceanside? Why should it serve one local high school for a one-time $1.2 million donation when all schools in the area are in need of field space? $1.2 million is a very small contribution to a project of this magnitude. The town aligning itself with a single public high school in a town of so much diversity is alarming. It seems like the town would be much better served to build the baseball fields as originally planned. No additional funding will be required, and Lucy Beckham High School could then use the baseball fields across the street from the school. Please go back to the original plan. Thank you.
Trenum Walker and Pamela Goldman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Trenum Walker. I'm here again today on behalf of the Miller family to talk about the proposed ordinance to reduce the height. As you heard from Clyde DeBrew, another purchaser walked this week, the fourth one. Why'd they walk? They walked because of the pending ordinance to reduce the height. Our family, who's been in the town for a long time, is paying $35,000 a year in property taxes and is basically handcuffed because every time they get a purchaser and get them under contract, the town moves the goalposts in some way and they walk. Any redevelopment project has to be financially feasible. I think we're looking at this through one lens, and that's a height lens. Planning is more than a one-dimensional characteristic of height. Any developer has to look and see if it pencils. Construction costs are high, impact fees are high, it has to work. We know 55 feet doesn't work because we lost a purchaser this week. So I would echo what Clyde said. We would ask that if you're not going to wait as the Planning Commission suggested and recommended, that at a minimum, we would ask for you to amend the ordinance to allow 65 feet on this tract. All parcels are not alike. This is an ideal tract. 65 feet may work. It will allow a 5-foot building. When you consider some of the requirements of the overlay and what has to go in the first floor and the other costs, it can only be done with 65 feet. So when you come to a vote, we'd ask one of two things, either to amend to provide for that or to defer. Your ordinance is pending. Nobody can put in an application, so you've stopped any development under the existing ordinance. Thank you for your consideration. We think it's a fair result, and we appreciate any consideration you give to that.
Lucy Gordon's next, please.
Pamela Joanne Goldman, 704 Gatepost. Good evening, Town Council.
Recently, it was brought to light that that Phase 3 of the Carolina Park Recreation Complex had shifted to replace an originally proposed and fully funded full-size baseball field with a football stadium through a partnership with Oceanside Collegiate Academy. The Carolina Park Recreation Complex was designed to be completed in phases in order to disseminate the burden of the costs, which is well over $6 million in total. On May 6th, in 2019, the Recreation Committee meeting included a robust discussion of the stadium proposal that would incur additional costs, namely an artificial turf field to the tune of $600,000, plus additional parking and an access road as required by town ordinances for an estimated $1.2 million. While the parking would eventually come into play down the road for any design, the stadium, with a summer of 2021 deadline, would mean that those costs would have to be funded now. On November the 4th, the conversation was continued in the Recreation Committee meeting where, quote, they anticipate being $1.5 million short, which had to be authorized by council, end of quote. It was not until the February 25th, 2020 budget meeting that funding options were finally presented. How is the stadium component being funded? Which capital improvement projects, like the Park West pool renovation and much-needed electrical upgrades to our fields, will be discarded in lieu of funding this, and why? I respectfully ask for a referendum that will give more reasonable options that will not break the bank, and a more reasonable timeline for this green space for the taxpayers of Mount Pleasant. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Gordon. Drew Burris.
Lucy Gordon, 1551 Ben Sawyer. I just wanted to, I had written about the Heights plan as well as the nonconforming, but I just wanted to reiterate for anyone who's not aware that the Heights plan is not part of the comp plan. And as a forum, we did not consider or look at the maps or review the Heights plan. We were not aware of some of these heights till well after the fact. So on the other hand, the comp plan does defer to the Heights plan. It assumes we have in place an acceptable Heights plan that can guide its decision-making in terms of land use. We don't apparently have an acceptable Heights plan, and I would encourage us to get that done before we continue with the comp plan. The other thing I would be is optimistic that the nonconforming ordinance can be modified. There's just one point that needs to be modified, doesn't have to be rewritten, before 6 months to a year. I think that would solve a lot of problems for numerous properties that fall into this category. Thank you.
Walt Miller.
Good evening, Drew Burris, 219 Simmons Street. Mayor and Town Council, I appreciate your time. I'm a property owner on 219 Simmons Street, and years ago, y'all spent a lot of money doing a charrette study, and brought in some people from Connecticut, and came up with the plan that we're now seeing unfold. This will be the second or third time my property height has been changed arbitrarily for a reason I'm not sure exactly what. It appears that there's a vocal minority that seems to be speaking for a lot of the property owners. I know the last go-round at Moultrie School, there was presentations and charrettes and graphs and stuff like that. I just appreciate, I think everybody's an advocate of their own property rights, and I just appreciate some consideration if you need more time to study it or, work with the planning department to come up with a solution. But just arbitrarily changing property values, property heights, again, this is the second or third time it's happened without really any, reason other than just somebody wants to lower the heights. But I appreciate it.
David Basto is next.
Good evening, Walt Miller IV, 512 Johnny Dodds Boulevard. I'm here on behalf of my family and the Miller property to speak out against certain board members' intentions of decreasing building heights from 80 feet to 55 feet in the hub where the former Miller Cadillac dealership is located. I'd like to remind everyone that we have a planning commission who works hard to formulate comprehensive town plans, and I thank them for that. However, I would have to imagine that they probably feel some type of way when their hard work and their professional recommendations are shot down by council members who seem to have their own agenda. For 5+ years, our family has seen developers come and go due to the council's recurrent downzonings. The Planning Commission long has recognized our property, one of the best positioned in Mount Pleasant for economic development because of its unique size and location, as one of the few that an 80-foot height limit is appropriate. We have seen our property values slowly decrease and just recently have had yet another developer pull out, citing downzoning and height as the reason the project was no longer economically viable. This is problematic. Today, we ask for a fair compromise and request the council side with the planning staff's original proposal to lower the height from 80 feet to 65 feet. Anything less than 65 feet drastically reduces the marketability and value of our property and puts us in a position where other action must be taken. Thank you.
Vishal Patel.
Good evening. My name is David Bastow, and I'm here to talk about Article 2, the rezoning of the 3 parcels that are townhouses, one of which I own. I bought this for my daughter, and I've stood up here before you before I know and spoken about this, and I wanted her to be in a safe, comfortable environment in a beautiful part of the city, which is Mount Pleasant, where children can go to Moultrie, either walk or ride their bikes. And I bought this house in Sullivan's Point, thinking that it would be a good investment and that it would be a fine place for my family to live. It turns out it is a fine place for my family to live, and they can ride their bikes to school and everything. But now it seems as if even if it's rezoned, unless you restore the overlay, that it won't be of value to my apartment because it won't be able to be rebuilt to its original status. So I'm asking, please, if you would, consider the overlay. Not restoring the overlay is like pulling the rug out from under us, because without the overlay, we aren't able to restore our homes to what they're supposed to be should they be more than 50% destroyed. And I look at this group, and you all look like normal, reasonable people that I see every day, and I don't feel like I'm standing up here trying to fight City Hall. I just wish, if I can, to please request again that you instate the overlay. Thank you very much.
Brett Woodward.
Hello, good evening. My name is Vishal Patel. Along with my brother and father, I own 2 properties in the proposed height change district at 400 McGrath Darby and 310 Johnny Dodds. The proposed height changes would dramatically affect what we've been working towards, which is a redevelopment of 310 Johnny Dodds over the last 8 years. We purchased that property in 2012 with every intention of redeveloping it. What sits there is a 40-year-old 2-story exterior corridor motel, which we've renovated and made safe and clean for our guests, but ultimately is not the highest and best use of that property. We certainly have been working over the last 8 years to get into a position, a financial position, working with architects, engineers, different branding partners to be able to actually execute the plan for redevelopment, and we are on the cusp of that, but reducing the height from 80 to 55 feet would certainly not make it financially feasible for us to continue with that plan, and certainly would have a negative effect on us personally, but we think the town overall. We certainly don't think a 2-story exterior 40-year-old motel is the highest and best use for a very visible entry mat for the town. I have no intention of building 80 feet. I'm just asking for the heights that the buildings that surround me are. The Hilton Garden Inn next to me is 70 feet. The Indigo, I think, is 60, 62 feet. We're not asking for, I'm not going to build a skyscraper or something that looks out of place, but certainly something that fits more in with our surrounding uses. I urge you just to take Planning Commission's recommendation to kind of take a step back and really reach out to property owners to understand what their needs are, but also look at it from a comprehensive view of what the town needs moving forward. Thank you.
Chris Swisher.
Brett Woodward, 222 West Coleman, Mayor, council members. I too am here to ask you to reconsider this height limit, lowering that has been proposed. My perspective is a little bit different in that we have a piece of property across the street that we are roughly 60 days from closing on, that we had purchased or planned to purchase for a redevelopment, and we have been working on this project for quite some time, and this was in the 80-foot height, and for it to now get lowered to what's proposed of 55 could have a huge negative impact on us. And I think what's important to understand is and kind of what the Miller family and Road family have faced with guys pulling out. Our biggest challenge has been with the capital sources and capital markets that we invest with throughout in our various projects, who have a belief that Mount Pleasant has too much entitlement risk to come in and invest capital into. And we have overcome that over the last 60 days to 30 days ago, have that kind of come back up and rear its ugly head to where they feel like Mount Pleasant is not a place that they feel comfortable doing business in. And I think this project, if going forward, would be a great addition to the town and be an improvement from what is there currently. And so I hope you just reconsider that and at least hit the pause button and let's have some discussion about it. Thank you.
Trevor Cangelosi.
Hi, Chris Swisher, 3037 Intracoastal View Drive. Thank you first for allowing us to bring those boys up in front of the group. That was a huge highlight for them and for their families as well, and great for us to represent the town of Mount Pleasant. So I wanted to maybe just give my vote of backing for the Carolina Sports Complex, the newly proposed plans from the standpoint of artificial turf, from an availability, from a maintenance, from an injury perspective. We have 4 children that really appreciate what the town puts forth from a recreational perspective. From a multi-recreational, be it obviously football would be great, but lacrosse, soccer, whatever that we do there, I think it would be great to modernize what we're doing. The Carolina Park area is beautiful, and to complete that with an artificial field, turf field would be fantastic. From an injury perspective, from a fire ant perspective, from a pothole perspective, a level playing field. And again, as we've traveled around and played multiple sports all over the state of South Carolina, I would expect Mount Pleasant to have the types of facilities that are more modern. The lower state championship that we played here versus Dillon, we wanted to play on the field up at the Wando Complex, and for whatever reason we're unavailable to do so. Would have been great to host that and start to bring a little bit of pride at least from a football perspective here as well. Now, I appreciate that a local high school is wanting to donate money. We heard also too that other high schools want to use facilities without paying or donating money as well too. But so I think from that standpoint, I just would give a vote of confidence from a youth perspective to vote for the artificial turf and the new plan that's been put forth. So thank you very much.
Chad Greer is next. Go ahead. No, please. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen of Town Council, Mayor David, Trevor Cangelosi, 1242 White Flat Road. My business partner, Jeff Ross, is also going to be handing up some handouts very briefly. We appreciate your time so much. This is in reference to items in the planning, first readings of ordinance to rezone 4 and 5 from R1 and PD to Office Park. This is a reference to something that the town has already recommended for approval. It's 2 lots on Bowman Road at White Flat Road, which is just behind Watermark. Our building is short. It is about half as high as the other houses in the neighborhood, and it abuts Bowman Road. We have asked that those two parcels be rezoned to office park. We have an office there. This history is tedious. I won't go into it, but I've handed something up. Basically, it was a house on Bowman. We wanted to make it an office. We reached out to the town, indicated it was a very nice house that was there. It was in a zone that was future commercial. We asked the town if we could turn it into an office. They said they thought so, no problem with that. We then moved into it and started doing some work. We may have gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit. For that, Jeff and I apologize profusely. Beyond that, we think it fits perfectly. It is shiplap on the inside, tin roof, board and batten on the outside. It looks like it belongs in the old village. It looks like a house. It's a fabulous office. If you ever need an attorney, go to David. If you ever need somebody else, come to us. But we appreciate your consideration. Again, our apologies for getting a little bit ahead. We are going to work with Lee very closely to make sure that all of the town's concerns related to it being commercial property are met. Howard's concerns, very valid concern related to parking, are met, and we're going to work with you guys very closely to make sure it is a perfect building for the town of Mount Pleasant. Again, very short building. Thank you so much.
Mr. Greer. And Brian Keels, you're up next.
Chad Greer, 1606 Marsh Harbor Lane. An athletic director at Oceanside, and first off, again, want to reiterate our thanks for the partnership we've enjoyed with the town. The reason I'm here, I'm glad I came because kind of the comments I heard tonight were very indicative of some confusion that seems to be going on around the project at Carolina Park. And I just want to clarify the email I sent you. I tried to simplify things. I think I can further simplify. It is, first off, from a partnership perspective, we pay to use Mount Pleasant facilities anytime we use them when the town would be using them. The only time that there's a quid pro quo for the free use of our facilities, which the town enjoys, is when the town has no use of them. So during the daytime, there is no town activities, and we use the fields then. In the evening, just like anybody else, we pay to rent the fields like any other outside source would. So we're not asking for preferential treatment. In fact, but instead of being vilified in social media and things being put out on social media, I don't think are in some cases really devoid of merit. The fact is, the Phase 3 of Carolina Park that I've spent over a year personally working on was already approved with a road, with parking, with a rectangle field. It just happened to be grass. You funded it, you approved it. The baseball field is poor dimensions, it faces the sun. It's going to have to be reworked anyway. What we proposed in partnership with the town was take what you've already built and approved and planned and make it better. We'll make it better, but we're going to give you the money to make it better. We're not asking you to give us any money. We're asking you to build what you said you wanted to build, that you contemplated, you drew up, and we came and said, hey, look, what if we put some bleachers and a press box on it and make it a stadium, and we'll pay for it. That's all this is. The parking, the road, that was already contemplated. So I just, instead of being vilified or put us against you, we're trying to work with you. And we want to continue to work with you, and we're very excited that this partnership could continue to the point of we need another baseball field. We've offered, and we have part of the plan to build a regulation baseball field on our property, which is adjacent to Carolina Park that the town will get to use. Thank you.
Brian. Nikki Ketchen is next.
Good evening, Town Council, Mayor. I'm Brian Keels. I live at 419 Morrison Street. And tonight, you're going to be voting on the changes to the building height ordinances, as I understand it. And as part of the ownership group that represents the Bowman Place property where the Dixon Nordstrom Rack is located, I want to express some of our concerns with the inconsistencies that we've seen in the building height plan. If you'll look at the second page of the handout I provided, you'll see the proposed building height map. And on there, you'll see Bowman Place circled in red. If you also look at the heights for all of the properties on Johnny Dodds Boulevard, basically the minimum height that's proposed is 55 feet. And if you look down at Bowman Place, we're proposed to be changed from 80 to 45 feet. Now, I understand the goal of reducing development density by lowering building heights, and we're not opposed to lowering the height of 80 feet that's allowed today on our property, but our concern is the inconsistency of the plan and the challenge it creates in trying to attract high-quality medical users that are very well going to likely need more than the 45 feet that's proposed today. So at the end of the day, all we're asking is to be treated the same as every other property along Johnny Dodds. And tonight, when you're voting, I ask you please consider these three points that I think are very worthy. Bowman Place is one of the largest properties on Johnny Dodds Boulevard between Ravenel Bridge and 526. It's 18 acres with over 850 feet of frontage on Johnny Dodds. It's surrounded by 3 of the largest roads in Mount Pleasant, Johnny Dodds, Bowman, and I-526. And its location is considered currently in the comp plan to be one of the main hubs. And lastly, it does not border any residential areas. So again, we're not here to oppose the height reduction. All we're asking is to be treated the same way as everybody else on Johnny Dodds. Thank you.
Celeste Joy.
Hi, I'm Nikki Ketchen. I live in 596 Fisherman's Bend. This may not be the right meeting, but I'm just going to give my 2 cents. I'm a parent of 3 sons who play baseball in the town of Mount Pleasant. My oldest plays for Wando. I have an 8th and 6th grader who play for Lang Middle School. They practice and play their games at the Wando South Field, which is right across the street from Lucy Beckham. They don't get to practice every single day. Their practices change every week because there's just not enough baseball fields. I don't know if you know, there's 2 sizes. There's a field for 12 and under, and then there's a bigger field for 13 and up. The 13 and up fields are the limited fields, and the adults also play and have to use that Wando South Field. And this time next year, my son will be a freshman at Beckham. Baseball is his life. And when we found out that we might not get to use the field next door, right across the street, because there's just not enough field space for the Mount Pleasant players, that's just disappointing because they're coming all the way up through the ranks from rec, then to middle school, and now they're high schoolers, and they need the fields and they need the space. So I'm just asking, and they need the proximity too, because these are only freshmen and sophomores, so parents have to drive. They're not even driving yet, so if we can't go right across the street, the parents are gonna have to pick them up, drive them all the way down to like the Park West fields or the New Carolina Park fields, and that's a big burden in traffic for parents. So I'm just asking for your consideration of sharing or giving the Lucy Beckham baseball team that field during the season. They need it every single day for practice so they can be competitive. They need it for games. And then also making sure when you're talking about your future proposals for rec fields that you're including large baseball fields so they can accommodate the issues that we're already having with practices and things for other teams, middle school teams and beyond. Thank you for your time.
And Ms. Joy, are you here? That's all I have, sir.
Well, that's it? Is there anyone who did not sign up? Yes, sir. We know that happens sometimes, and we try to have a little mercy. Yes, sir.
I'm Dennis Blythe, 610 Pelzer Drive, and thank you for that. Apologize for arriving late. There's 2 items on the agenda. One I want very quick is the consideration and discussion of the impact fees. I oppose dramatically any thought of reducing the impact fees unless we have done some sort of study that I'm not aware of, since the previous studies that indicate that the costs, the impact that it has on the town has been reduced. My understanding is now we're at something like 80% of what the expected impact is on the town, and I do not believe it should be reduced. But secondly, considering the building heights, I would like to support the reduction in building heights, especially in the area of Bowman Road, the hospital, 526, et cetera. The reason is that all of that is smack dab in the middle of the Shem Creek watershed. Shem Creek traditionally came from Snee Farm golf courses all the way down through Wando Lakes, beside Wando, and now Lucy Beckham, through an area now where we have about 10 to 15 acres there's a conservation easement, another 20 acres that the town owns, et cetera, a conservation easement between 526 and 17 on the hospital side. All of those lakes and such that are in that vicinity are there for a reason. Wando Lakes, that small subdivision, floods like crazy, and we now have we're doing mitigation to try and correct the flooding there, because all of that is the Shem Creek watershed. We have huge parking lot where Dick's is, et cetera, that has been improved since it was Kmart, because it used to be, it used to all flood straight into Kmart. Anyway, please consider that, okay, the impact on Shim Creek. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That would conclude the public comment portion of the agenda, which was item 6. Item number 7 is listed as consent agenda items. I don't know if this means there's a lack of consent or lack of items, but there are no consent agenda items. And that moves us to item number 8, which is on page 2 of the published agenda, which is planning.
Good
Mr.
evening,
Auld.
Mayor and Council. First item under new business is first reading of an annexation petition. These two next cases are actually neighboring properties. The first one is about a half an acre of land at 1531.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Is the motion for item 1 or for item 1 and 2?
Items 1 and 2.
Item 1 and 2. Is the
Yes, sir.
second? Okay,
Yes,
the
sir.
motion and the second are for items 1 and 2. We are in discussion. Any comments? That will bring us to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve items 1 and 2, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
It's approval of first readings of ordinance number 217 and 218.
Made that one easy on me. Michelle will take the next item.
Thank you.
We would now be on item 3. Thank you.
On item 3, thank you. This is a request to rezone a parcel from R1 to R4, medium-density residential district. As you can see, it's off of Rifle Range Road and Myrick Road on Wash Ridge. Here's the comprehensive plan, which does call for medium-density neighborhood. And here's a zoning map. So you can see the hatched parcels are all in the county. This was a development that was done in the county. It met the county standards. And to automatically annex in, it gets that automatic designation of R1, and that's what happened with this parcel. There has been another rezoning in the neighborhood to R4. The request is consistent with the comp plan, and it is consistent with the R4 lot standards. And I think this came to staff. I think this came to the attention of staff because the owner wanted to do some improvements or an addition, and they're unable to do that. The R1 requires the lot to be 10,000 square feet. This is just under 5,000 square feet, so they can't meet the setbacks or anything. So this would actually make the lot conforming and would enable the homeowner to do some improvements. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second. We are in discussion. Any council members? May I ask, just for my clarification, because I did not get to be there for the committee. In other words, the surrounding neighborhood, this was built in the county. They're annexing in, so it is compliant. In other words, we're not putting an R4 in an R1 neighborhood, existing R1 neighborhood. Is that correct?
That's correct. As you can see, most of the neighborhood is still in the county, but it was developed to county standards that match our R4 zoning district.
Okay. Right, we have a, yes, sir.
Mayor, I was just going to add, if you go out there and look at it, there's probably 4 or 5 separate properties, all about the same size on the lot. And I was a little bit surprised when I saw it in kind of a donut hole area, and that's exactly what it is. But I think we're better off having it in the town than outside the town.
And we're not changing the character of the neighborhood at all?
It's definitely R4 right now.
All right, the motion is to approve item number 3. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
First reading, ordinance number 219.
Item 4, please.
Yes, sir. So these next two I'll actually kind of present together. These are properties you've actually seen in the past, but there's an additional one. So it's 1242 White Flat Road, and then the property across the street, which is vacant except for a signage that's been placed on the property. And this is Fronts Bowman Road, and they both have access to White Flat Road as well. The comprehensive plan does call for commercial land uses. This came to you a few months ago with a request to rezone 1242 to neighborhood commercial. The request before you tonight is to rezone both parcels
The one is in the PD, the Watermark PD, the other one is zoned R1. So the request tonight is to rezone these not to NC, but to OP, Office Professional, to accommodate the existing office that's been converted from a residential use. The applicant, as I said, attempted to rezone in November the single parcel with the improvements on it. The Planning Commission recommended approval, however, Town Council denied this request. There were concerns about the site and being able to accommodate the improvements and the change in land use from residential to commercial. Staff has done an initial review. Of course, if the rezoning is approved, they will have to go through Design Review Board. However, staff has done some initial review of the site and to determine if they could meet buffers, parking, and things like that. And what we have decided is that based on the existing survey, they probably could not meet the 20 to 30 build-to line, which is required for commercial use. However, there were no improvements made to the front of the structure, so it's likely that it would be grandfathered in and that wouldn't be an issue. They are proposing to accommodate their parking off-site on the parcel across White Flat Road. Our zoning ordinance does allow for off-site parking. That would be considered the principal use on that property. It would be permitted. They would just have to meet the buffers and the required parking. There also would be a need to meet all the buffer yard requirements. At this point, it does appear that there's a porch that would encroach in the buffer yard. They would either need to remove the porch or get a variance from the relief of the standards of the zoning ordinance. And that's all I have for you on this, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval, Mayor, and then I've got a comment to make, a couple of comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we're in discussion. Mr. Chapman?
Yes, sir. Mayor and members of council, I was not excited about the initial item when it came to us to zone it neighborhood commercial. Property owners have come back now with Office Professional. I think that's more reasonable for that residential area. It is right on Bowman Road, and in our discussions within committee, the applicant was very willing to remove the porch to make it compliant. He was also willing to use some type of pervious pavers across the street. And with our resiliency committee now coming forward and trying to reduce the amount of runoff, I think that's a good thing. And I applaud him for being willing to do that. And I'm happy to recommend approval.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, so I voted for this the first time, and I'll vote for it again, because as we look at our town and our financial situation, we need to be looking for areas that we can move away from residential and into commercial development. So land right along Bowman Road at the entrance of a neighborhood, a professional office like a lawyer's office is a perfect fit. It fits nicely, and it increases our tax base, so.
Other comments? All right, the motion is to approve. This is item number 4. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I think it's 4 and 5. Well, they're together, but I guess we got to do them separate.
What is I believe the motion was not specific as to 5.
Well,
Right.
I apologize. I wanted it to be combined because.
That's all right.
And I can move for item 5.
Second.
Just a second.
We've already had a vote, man, so I'm not sure we want to.
I haven't announced it, though, and under Robert's rules, I have to announce the motion did pass unanimously. Yes, sir, Mr. Pegler, you have it.
Right.
All right?
No, sir, I think that's it.
Okay. Item number 5. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Move for approval
Second.
on item number 5. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve item 5, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
First reading ordinance number 20021.
Item number 6.
Good evening. This is a hopefully straightforward staff-initiated change to definition 156. to impervious surface to exclude a lot of the overhangs of buildings.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Very good job. Thank you, Kevin.
Number 20022.
This brings us to old business. Item B, we're on page 4 of your agenda, which brings us to some final readings. Item number 1, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. This is an annexation of a lot in Snowden.
Second.
And we have a motion and we have a second to approve. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Final reading, ordinance number 20009.
Item number 2, please.
Yes, Mayor, items 2, 3, and 4 are all related. They are the rezoning requests for the Sullivan's Point, with each one going to a separate residential zoning district. So we have one area that goes to TH for townhouse, one that goes to R4 for medium-density residential, and another area that goes to R3, medium-density residential.
Motion to approve 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve 2, 3, and 4. I have a question just for clarification. I think we had decided also that we were going to come up with a long-term, non-conforming zoning solution, I think is the way to put it. So my question would be, how does this affect that effort? Are we back to putting an overlay on something that we already took the overlay off?
Mr. Mayor, I can answer on the non-conforming provisions. We do, in fact, staff is meeting tomorrow morning with the Planning Commission for a special meeting on that very topic. So you all directed Planning Commission to review non-conformity provisions, and we'll be meeting with them in the morning. We should be able to bring something to the Planning Committee at the April meeting, and then we can go from there. At this point, you would be reestablishing the overlay, attaching those base zoning districts, because this is ahead of the work that it will take, primarily on the nonconformities, just the protocol of doing Planning Commission public hearing, first reading, and final reading. So it just takes a certain amount of time anyway.
Because I think, and I'm still just to get this all in the right order, I think we agree that we're trying to solve the problem of what happens, like we heard tonight from the property owners, when you're non-conforming. We are not trying to reinstitute certain zonings that we've already taken off. A question I would have, and I direct it legal or at Mr. Ulma, can we put a sunset clause on the overlay, if we're putting the overlay back on, that says that this overlay expires at such time as the passage of our non-conforming zoning solution?
I'll let David answer that one, Mayor.
Yeah, I know, it's a complex question.
Thank you. So Mayor, I think the overall answer is yes, you can do that. I think the issue tonight is that has not gone through advertisement, Planning Commission, so it couldn't be done right now at final reading, even though amendment is proper at final reading. I would think we'd probably have some notice issues with that specific part of this.
Any council members? Because I have a comment. I mean, I have no intention in the long run of leaving on an overlay that we took off for good reason. And so I get it that if property conveyances are being held up by that, that's a legitimate concern. But we will be back, and I guess I'm talking to the chairman of planning, we will be talking about this in the future when we fix the underlying problem of what happens, and Mr. Rambo, you have brought this up, what happens when we have non-conforming, because we do change zoning, and we change it for good reasons, and it's the betterment of the entire community. I think if we pass this, we're making an exception for one property because of an unintended consequence, but I think in the long run, I don't see a desire to leave in place something that we're only putting back as a temporary fix. Does that make sense?
Mayor?
Yes.
One suggestion. I like it when he looks that way. One suggestion would be like what you will see a little bit later on your agenda, is that we could make sure that we tag this area, and council can initiate zoning changes at your choice. So we could be able to then, once the nonconformity provisions come through and they take care of, and we'd make sure that they take care of the issue here, then we could come back to you, and like you're going to look at later on Moultrie Middle School, council could initiate that process and remove the overlay, just leaving those base zoning districts.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Just say, that would be that's a very reasonable way to handle this, to go ahead and give the property owners their comfort. And then once the nonconformity clause is like we like it, is how we like it, then we can take the overlay back off again.
Okay. All right, so the motion is to approve items 2, 3, and 4. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously, and that's for items 2, 3, and 4.
Final readings, ordinance number 20010, ordinance number 20011, and 20012.
This brings us to item number 5. I think we all know what this is about. Before we get into a long, drawn-out conversation tonight, I think, and the chair would entertain a motion to defer. We have been offered some things tonight by property owners that I think if we do the work and bring it back ready to do that, we can save ourselves a lot of time, a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. I think, is this a pending ordinance situation?
Excuse me, that was mentioned prior, but I don't know that that was formalized. If
I will
you'd like
move,
to add
first of
that.
all, Mayor, to impose the pending ordinance doctrine.
To impose or oppose?
Impose.
Impose.
The pending ordinance doctrine.
And I would suggest, Mayor, that, I don't know what's going on, as part of the deferral process.
For
it'd
item
be
5,
imposed.
as part of the deferral process.
Okay. Now,
And to defer.
the chair would, okay, that's your motion?
Yes, sir.
To defer with the pending ordinance doctrine?
Yes, sir.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. We have a second over there. Under Robert's Rules, council gets to speak first. Is there any comment?
What exact, go ahead. I didn't get recognized, I'm sorry.
You're recognized now.
Can you give me a quick definition of what a pending ordinance doctrine is?
Yes, sir. We've already had first reading, and the legal effect is that no changes, typically until an ordinance is finalized, anyone would have the opportunity to develop or build under the old rules. What essentially you'd be doing, council would be doing, is suspending the rules subject to the ordinance at first reading. So they wouldn't be able to build or get a permit or anything of the like under the old rules at this point.
Mr. Chapman?
Mayor, I was prepared to make a presentation. I'm very happy to defer. And what I would encourage all of the members of council to do is work with the planning department and go parcel by parcel, street by street with this option C. I came up with a number of suggested revisions, and I think if you sit down with Mr. Ullman, a member of the planning staff, and go block by block with them, it's very helpful. Our initial idea about changing the heights, as you know, I felt we needed to wait till a comprehensive plan. Y'all have convinced me I need to do better than that, and so that's why I said I was prepared tonight to give some suggestions as an amendment, but then to suggest that everyone on council do the same thing. I don't begin to suggest my plan is the best plan, but it does recognize some of the issues that have been brought to us. It recognizes the need to have some lowering of heights, but we need to do a microscopic plan rather than macroscopic, which is what option C was. Mr. Ullman, the planning staff were, thrust into doing this quickly, And, you know, they did the best they could. But each individual council member needs to sit down and go block by block, parcel by parcel, with what's out there, and come up with your suggestions on what could happen. And the plan to move forward with a comprehensive plan right now that we passed on in Planning Committee specifically suggests that from March 13th, I think, till the 17th, and it may be a little bit longer, we do just that we all, you know, try to come up with what we think should be on this revision to the height ordinance.
It's just been pointed out to me as a point of order that the motion should include items 5 and 6.
I include items 5 and 6.
5 and 6 does a second, okay, and the second. And I thank you for that. I think what we hear is members of the community, property owners are willing to work with us to take a look at this. And my point is, personally, my personal opinion, I'd rather get an ordinance that we can pass that's not going to be challenged and accomplishes our purpose of lowering building heights in general. And I think with a little more work, we can certainly, nothing's ever perfect in government, but I think we can get closer. Yes, ma'am.
So I'll just share a couple of thoughts to keep in mind as we're going to go back on this process and defer and work on it. And the first one is that this request to lower building heights came from some citizens who were very concerned about the possibility of having a lot more tall buildings than we already have in town. And as we all know, those of us who have looked at the height plan, and I think all on council certainly have, right now, the way it's zoned is that the 80-foot heights only apply to the ends where the hospital is, and then right closer to the bridge in that area, Wingo Way and so forth. And there's several things about this on all levels that bother me. The first one is going back to property rights. People bought this land, and they bought it whether it was a long time ago or recently or what the situation was. They bought that land. Now, there's been an argument that, well, we've raised heights along the way. Well, that was before I was on council, so I can't speak to that. What I can say is I don't think that we can justify, therefore we should be able to lower them at will as the reasoning for being able to do that. We're not kings here. We are elected officials. We are asked to do jobs for and represent the people, but there are citizens on both sides of this, as well as business owners who are investing a lot of money to bring services and jobs to our community. And so I think that when we start thinking about a microscopic look and we start saying, let's walk the property, how about let's try to do what I've been trying to do, and I can't do it alone. And I never intended to do it alone. We have an economic advisory board, but that's a citizens' private group. How about if council helps me, as the economic development chair, get proactive and talk to the owners and say, what is your best use? What is it that you have in mind? I hate to hear that the Miller folks have lost a possible deal that may not have involved 80 feet. Or maybe it involved 65 feet with something that's sticking up on the top like a cupola or one of those kind of things. And so for us to say willy-nilly, we'll go look out at the property, we don't own that property. The town doesn't own it. We didn't invest our hard-earned money in it. We appreciate businesses bringing investments in buildings and in jobs and these things to our community. And we need to start acting like we appreciate that. And the best way to act like we appreciate that is to actually go out and listen to the people that own that property and not feel that we should just be reactionary because a few citizens are concerned about a lot of height. I am in no way, shape, or form saying I think we want lots of 80-foot buildings in town. We do have a few, some of them for very important purposes, such as around the hospital area and so forth. But I do believe we need, as council, to be more thoughtful in this process, which I believe sort of echoes what Councilman Chapman has said, but let's go even further. Let's actually talk and reach out to the owners and see if we can't come to some agreements that everyone can win and not have someone go away feeling like they've lost tremendously. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to Mr. Chapman's comment, Mr. Chapman, some of us have met with the Planning Committee monthly on various issues, including this. So I can't speak for everybody, but I know I go to them all the time and ask them questions, and I've already talked to them about this. Another question we need to look at is how do we measure the height? Do we do it by floors, or we actually do it by, a foot, or, so those are some of the things we need to look at as well. Those are some of the questions that are out there. So I think you're right that those who have not had a chance to meet with them ought to, but some of us have, and some of us want to also investigate this further, so that's why I'm all for deferral as well.
All right. Yes, yes, you may. Ms. Corley first, because she hasn't spoken yet.
Just a question. So, after we meet with you, then you would just take our suggestions and create another option during which we would vote? Like, how does this ever come to a comprehensive?
This is me speaking. I think maybe council members, we can work together. There's some parcels on here that I have real problems with this map. I think I hear that from others, and I would like to talk with y'all about my suggested fix for that. And so hopefully when we come back, we have a much better idea than cherry picking this one, that one, this one, that one, and voting in this and all that. We kind of know who's going to propose what. We have time to think about it, and we come back. Now, of course, we can't do that with a quorum because that would be a secret meeting. But we can talk one-on-one. We can talk with the chair of the committee that's been working on this.
Mayor, I'd be happy to have a special meeting to do this.
We could do that.
I mean, it's important.
We
It's
could.
important to the community, so.
We could do a special meeting.
If we need a special meeting, I'm all for it.
All right, and it would come back either at a special meeting or come back, this would be final reading, so it does not go back anywhere, does it? No.
That's correct. I
To
mean,
committee or commission.
Right, during this deferral period, that certainly can happen. Any council member or the chair can put it on a committee, or there can be a special meeting or the like. But it will automatically come back next month if there's nothing done in the interim.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I have one more thing. So again, it's come to planning, but what is affected by this the most? It's the commercial development. It's people, and I mean businesses. So I think this needs to be something that, if anything, we also spend a little more time looking at the economic development. It doesn't necessarily have to come to the committee, but when we have that special meeting. But I do have a little problem with this deferral where we're going to suddenly say that because we're deferring, we're actually causing this ordinance to be in effect. I don't understand that part. Which part because what we're saying then is if anybody has an opportunity, let's say there's a place that right now says 45 or 40 on this proposal, am I hearing you say that they would be forced to stay within that if they had an opportunity for a contract in the next 30 days, they have to stick to this? I think so. Why is that? That doesn't seem right at all.
I'm going to let our attorney explain the pending ordinance doctrine, and then I'll be glad to answer your question.
Sure, that's the basis of the pending ordinances. While an ordinance is pending, legally, you don't want to, typically the idea is you don't want to create some rush to get in under the wire and take advantage of the old laws or rules while the public process is being played out. That's what that means. So, but yes, it's up to council as to whether you wish to take that step.
Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
What if there are any property owners that have pending projects or projects upcoming or whatever, and they would actually meet both the old and the new? They wouldn't be prevented from moving forward in their projects, would they? It would just be if they don't meet the new one. Is that right? Or would it be like anybody in this entire overlay who's working on a project, we're holding them all up?
It could be the effect unless they meet the provisions of the existing first reading document. I think answers your question.
Okay, yes, yeah, that was my question. Right. So, yeah, if their potential project met what the proposed one is, then they could move forward.
Yes, sir.
If you have a permit.
Well,
we had moved forward in obtaining a permit.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Yes, sir, Mr. O'Rourke.
My only comment on this, as I hear everything, is I believe if we asked the people involved what the problem was, it's what we're hearing right now. It's the fact that we can't make a decision, and that we change and we change and we change. I agree with the majority that have said this is important. We need to come in here soon and solve it. Even bad news is better than just back and forth and back and forth. I think we owe it to everyone involved to sit down, have a meeting, and get this resolved. So I am in strong favor of a special called meeting to deal with just this.
Okay. I think it's time to vote. So the motion is to defer items 5 and 6 and apply the pending ordinance doctrine. And as our ordinance allows, I can call a special meeting, or 3 council members can, and we will do that as soon as we think we are ready to pass something so that we can lift any uncertainty and get it done, and also have an ordinance that I think will stand any test that someone might throw its way. Are we prepared to vote? All in favor of the motion to defer and apply the pending ordinance doctrine for items 5 and 6, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimous.
I didn't even open my mouth.
Is that the end of planning? This is to item number 9, committee action items. The first is the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee. Who has that?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
first of all, thank you for appointing me as the liaison with the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee. And I had the pleasure of sitting down while they reviewed several applications. They were very thorough, and they did a great job. And as a result of that, I am pleased to make a motion that council approves the funding recommendations from the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee of $27,000 for the Town of Mount Pleasant Cap Commission Cultural Documentary, for USS Yorktown Foundation 4th of July Blast, and Mount Pleasant Symphony 2 concerts.
All right, we have a motion. Does it require a second? We can get one.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Howard, can you explain a little bit why the Select Men's and Women's Shootout was not funded this year? It's something that we've been doing for a long time.
The rules at which the advisory committee operates is that if you fail to show up to present your proposal, they will not score it. And they go through a very elaborate scoring process, not to mention the fact that they, ask questions after they've done the scoring of the people. They want to have the ability to know exactly what you're going to do, and in some cases, potentially make your proposal better. And that's what they did on at least one of them, I can tell you. So the committee that we appointed is very thorough, and they're very interested in what they do. But that's probably going to send a message out to anybody else that applies, that if you're interested enough to send something in to ask for money, you better come to the meeting and tell us what you're going to do and why your application is important. Now, I will tell you that this is the first set of ATAX money that we have. There will be a second possibility for them in the fall. So this is the first one this year. There's a second one coming up later in the year, and certainly those applicants who made that application have the opportunity to come back. I think the full amount was only, I think I said 27,000, leaving a balance still available of $123,000. So they have the right to come back, and they did a real thorough job, and I think Ms. Whitley has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just the exact same question about the Mount Pleasant Tourism Marketing Program. Was that a similar thing, they didn't come? Or was that something that the committee just decided?
Mr. DeMora has.
It was the same then.
The same, okay.
Same situation.
Same situation, all right.
So there's another shot at this for
Yes, sir.
right, okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? The motion is to approve those recommendations totaling $27,000. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item B is from the Planning Committee, approval to initiate Moultrie Middle School rezoning from area-wide business to Public Institution 1.
Yes, this was initially placed on the agenda by Councilman Rambo. We reached out to the school district about their opinion on whether or not this is something that should move forward, and they failed to respond. We gave them over 30 days to respond to our query. This basically, this rezoning, the purpose for it is to prevent the placement of a independent telecommunications monopole on there. There was a lot of concern from community members about the impact on children, and so Councilman Rambo and I worked together, and this is where we are.
I'm sorry, and did this come from the committee?
Yes.
Okay, so it does not require a second. We would be in discussion. Is this going to have any negative effect, and I know the answer, but for the record, on the operation of the town farmers market under public institution?
No.
Since that is CCSD property, no effect at all?
I asked the same question.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that. I just wanted to get it.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion. I don't think anybody's made a motion yet.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
there's been a motion.
there was a
That
motion. It's from committee. This is a motion from the committee. So
okay.
it does not require a second. Unless the parliamentarian is screeching no. All right. All right, so we have a motion from the committee, and this says to initiate, so what we're saying is there is a process.
I'll make the motion as the chair of committee.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. This only begins, so this does not, obviously, there's no ordinance number and all that. This starts the process.
That's correct. We would have to advertise and go to
Right.
Planning Commission for a public hearing first.
So a yes vote is only to initiate the process. This does not rezone this property as of tonight. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item C, this is from the Transportation Committee, consideration to authorize staff to grant a conditional use of right-of-way adjacent to 101 Mary Street from the town of Mount Pleasant. As the chair of the committee recommended by a 3-to-1 vote to grant the right-of-way. And this would actually be an encroachment permit, I believe, and the Transportation Department has I guess, a practice of any time there is a encroachment on town property of town right-of-way that council, before they grant it, am I right, Mr. Moore, that council would actually affirm a decision to do so. Do we have a short bit of information on this?
Mayor, if you want, I'll try to
I mean,
move it on, but you might be better, I guess, from staff.
Okay,
Mr. Morrison, would you provide an explanation?
yes. I see the pictures.
Good evening. I'll just refer to what you have in front of you as far as the exhibits go, just to give you the baseline of information. So we've received an encroachment permit application for essentially all the way to the right, the hatched in yellow area, which is a little less than 25 square feet. Excuse me, of an area of our unimproved right-of-way for Hibben Street, which would be utilized by the applicant to construct a small portion of their dock out into the marsh. So what they're asking for is that permit approval. We had discussion at the committee as to the appropriate method for that, and we've talked about whether, with something this significant, whether it should be an easement or not, and I think that's probably the direction we would go. But I'm here to answer any questions about it. Ultimately, if council would approves the concept of the encroachment, then we would finalize that, any conditions with the permit between us and legal.
Yes, ma'am.
Does allowing this encroachment prohibit, since this is a public right-of-way, prohibit public access, or would the public still be able to access through that right-of-way?
This area is 90 feet, approximately 90 feet from the end of the street. It's basically in the marsh, so there is no public access at this point in time.
Yeah, Councilmember Whitley, if you wanted, you could swim to it. Other than that, you can't drive to it. And I'm prepared to make a motion that we approve it.
I second.
Need a second? A second.
We have a motion and we have a second. We would be in discussion. Ms. Hyatt, yes, ma'am, you have, nice to hear from you.
Everybody, sometimes y'all ask what I'm going to, so I have nothing to ask after. My understanding is they'll need to walk on the property to access their dock that the town owns, right? When you're saying swim to it, I don't understand
under the
that
water.
response.
It's under the water.
The right-of-way is underwater
It's under the water.
that they're asking for.
Right, but isn't it on the land as well that they need to
No.
walk? See, I
No,
don't
ma'am.
understand the drawing here.
No, ma'am.
It's not real property, it's right-of-way. So in that sense, it's just like every other street that we have in the town. So they just have to enter our right-of-way in order to get out of the right-of-way into the portion that's really regulated by the state of South Carolina, which is the marsh area.
Okay. So if we ever wanted to build something at the end of the street, a view or dock or something, this would be in the way, right, of the right-of-way for the town?
Can I help?
Just say.
Is it?
It could be.
Well, we've seen
Could
much
be,
better
or yeah.
pictures, that's it.
Ms. Lanning has the floor.
We've seen much better pictures, so this isn't crystal clear at all. But what it is the dock extends out off of the property of the owner, and then it goes into the water, and at some point in the water, it crosses the easement right-of-way that happens to be town property. So it's out in the pluff mud under the water. So all they're doing is crossing a little piece of that. It doesn't infringe in any way on anything on the land,
And there are 3 other docks already encroaching.
doing the same thing.
Right, but if we wanted to build a dock there, we wouldn't be able to because their dock would be on our property, right?
Well, you wouldn't be able to build a dock unless you had something to extend it from. So this is extending from their property out into the water, and it just happens to cross a very small piece of this easement. And by the way, again, this is something that came down in Hugo, as did all the docks, and they all got rebuilt. But at the time, the owners weren't in a position or didn't want to or whatever. So the issue is partly that it's coming up later after this easement situation became an issue, so.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, Mr. Chapman said he was prepared to make a motion. He didn't actually make a motion. So, Mr. Chapman, do you actually make a motion?
Yeah, we had a motion,
thought
a
I did.
second, and
No,
we're in
you
discussion.
You said you were prepared to make a motion, but you didn't actually make the motion. I just want to make sure for the record that you're actually making the motion.
I'm making the motion.
There you go, thank you.
Good. Does anybody ask him to recognize? I was the lone no vote on this, on the Transportation Committee. I have a legal situation that the other members of this council do not have. And so it's not that as I told the applicant, if this were happening in a vacuum, I totally get it, and I'm not trying to be unreasonable. I'm not allowed under the terms of my defense to talk about that case, but I do not need to complicate my life in that manner. So I have to stick with that vote, and I certainly hope the applicants understand where I'm coming from on that. All right, we prepared to vote. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion passes 8-1. This brings us into council new business, Section A, Item 1. We either need to take a 5-minute break, or I need to ask the Mayor Pro Tem to chair if y'all want to consider.
I call for a recess.
We'll take a 5-minute recess, please.
Yeah, all right, perfect.
That's a great idea, Mayor.
Pretty well, yeah. Pretty close tonight.
Oh, you gotta correct that. You want it on the.
Yeah, it's good to see that.
Oh, and it works. Oh, and that might be what I'm doing too. It was disgusting. It was dark chocolate. I was like, ugh.
They can't scream. We're doing the best we can for both parties.
My phone call? What's that? I don't think. Today?
I think we need
Today?
this right.
It was a mistake. Oh, okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Trying to test the thing.
Yeah.
And have your name in there, I don't know why it's not under the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to call town hall, T-O, and it's right next to it. And I was
Hey,
like-
I do that all the time.
So I called you. and
I
was
do
like-
it all the time.
I left you a message
I
anyway.
do it all the time. Hey, I was, you see what Gary gave me?
PE, of course, yeah, you're a PE, of course you're gonna charge me.
I still tell the story. I know I've told you 10 times, but
No billable hours.
I remember when Jay called me when he died, when Jim died, and I still have his lock that I cut off his locker. Yeah, 25 years. Holy heck, am I old? I am old. It's good to see. It's great to see that still going. It really is. Good.
People from all over, a lot of teams. So.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks.
Well, that was one of the original ideas, as you're driving down from the bridge, it's taller, and it's, you know, you kind of come down and down.
But also, more understanding, because if it's within 2 increments of 10 feet, that's easy to understand. If it was 65, 45, 50, 80, it's just.
Sorry about that, but
No,
technically, you
no,
didn't make the
thank
motion.
you, thank you, I thought I had.
Gary, check this out, it looks really good.
Well, you know, David came over to thank me, he said, not me.
I'm glad you did. Hey, I'm gonna go use the facility.
There's gonna be a long night. You think, let's do this.
And I expected,
Yes.
it may have some value added to the, Freshman Ridge, and I like Jim Hinchey's thing about, let's just send them all by email, all three of us. And
A bunch?
No.
This discussion on
Things.
impact fees, is that just a discussion?
No, it says possible action. And then we're in, you know, the first reading on the budget, there's no amending, and then we're in executive session.
do I need a badge to get to the bathroom? I get this, my older boy drives a cab. Cole says, "No, I picked up something on vacation, and hey, China was beautiful."
I think because the town
I said, just kidding, folks.
Yes, thank you.
But I'm right here if they want to hear this.
Okay.
Value added.
Right.
Well, Mayor, evening, sir.
How you
are
doing?
All right, carry on, sir. So, conditions of council.
But she said there's already 3 other docks that cross our property.
Mr. O'Rourke is still here, and it's committee.
Yeah, I think hers, they said hers was on.
Kathy Land.
Give me a final decision.
She said something.
It's gonna be something in the next 30 days.
Or bid, or
Neither one of them will fit the bill.
Hey, Mike. Suzette really appreciates the birthday
And then you do the
present.
same thing again in 18 months.
yes.
I hear you.
Notice that she
I hear you.
likes that sugar-free vitamin water, and y'all gave her a whole.
I get up like 3:30. I guess he heard me. He came running out there.
That's so sweet. He's a sweet young man. She loves those sweet young men.
He really loves her.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hello, Chief. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, so it's just go down and do it.
I thought the part was over the water.
Yeah, I agree. It's a thing, and the voters would approve it, and it's X amount of hours we're supposed to, and it's fixed price. And then it sunsets, and we leave the stormwater fee there. If we can do this, and there's our bond bill. Here's my thought. Put it on
Well, what if they say no?
Then we're something.
But there's houses in the village that are underwater.
Then we gotta figure out, I mean, but if we don't ask the question, then how do we fix it?
Okay, so financially, that was.
And this was just first reading,
personally,
right?
I struggle with, I feel like it's our responsibility as a city to keep water out of people's wells. Just personal, which we aren't doing. The problem in the town is we have $322 million of deferred maintenance. And no funding, and we keep adding projects to it, so I think it's just money. But I guess, so financially it makes sense, philosophically, just me, and I might be the only one up here. I feel like we should do maintenance without, because if your house is high and dry, you're gonna vote no for that one, right? I'm not sure if that's really. Yes, yeah, sure.
That's almost worse.
About a referendum with the revenue bond.
I'm so much more quick because I was always a meeting.
So you pay the fee?
You are welcome.
Taxation, we just taxes like we should, and everybody pays their fair share.
Creates a factual situation where landowners under the U.S. Constitution have some degree of expectation.
Right.
Eric, was that first reading on the doc?
No reading.
It's just permission for us to give an encroachment permit. It's a done deal.
Okay. That what was presented to us was that like they're gonna cross our land.
Have to go out into our marsh, have to go out into our right of way.
How do they get, where's the beginning of their dock?
On their property of expectation.
But their property doesn't touch the road.
I can't draw it. Our property sticks out. Our road ends is marsh. They start the dock on their property, has to clip the marsh to go out. That portion of the marsh we own. That's why we had to give the encroachment permit for them to have a dock. Otherwise, they can't get out. We kind of block it.
Can't build anything.
It's almost bad.
Could have. Yeah. It gives us, anytime there's a,
Just defer, so you just defer, that would be awesome.
And we're gonna fix it.
No, I mean, if you just defer.
You're gonna fix all kinds of stuff. You're gonna fix the 900 people that stood up here and said, what are you gonna do with phase 3 of Carolina Park?
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're gonna fix it all.
With 1 mil?
With 1
I
million.
wanna see that.
For 2 or 3 years. Okay. And you can say, you can hang the banner and say, we've slowed down the growth, we've slowed down the growth. But it was only 5 minutes. So if you give me $20, we're good.
I'm not holding this up.
I think.
Get them all straightened out.
I tell you what,
guess.
if that ever passed, I'd have a heart attack. I'd have a heart attack and resign.
All right, are we ready to reconvene, please? All right, council is reconvened. It's almost 8 o'clock. We might get out fairly early tonight if we behave ourselves. I know I just jinxed it. We're in section 10, council business, item A, new business 1, discussion and possible action to reduce development impact fees. You're the designee?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Cotard.
Thank you. No pressure about the time, by the way. So I'm going to provide just some quick background information. Some you've seen before, some is new. The town adopted 4 different impact fees. And we did it based on 2 different calculations on the methodology. Recreation, fire, and municipal are based on the consumption-driven approach, and transportation on the improvements-driven approach. The maximum allowable fees are established, and then town council determines what discount rates they'd like to apply, and they can apply a different one per category, but within one category, they cannot distinguish between, say, residential and non-residential. The development fee ordinance, the old one was repealed and replaced effective July 1, 2017. We no longer were grandfathered. It does fall under state codes. We actually had 7 impact fees, and now we're down to the 4. Since that time, 2 other ordinances have been approved that when you're looking at overall revenue collection, that could have some bearing on the amount we collect. One was the building permit allocation that was done in January for a period of 5 years, and one was the multifamily moratorium, and that was done April of 2019, and that was the second. Prior to that had been a 2-year one that was done in 2017. When this ordinance was adopted, it did have timelines. Every 6 months was part of the original ordinance in which the discount rate would decrease. Thereby, you would charge more of the maximum allowable fee. So what we show here since 2015 is the amount of revenue that has been collected for impact fees. When you go to compare, some questions have come up of how did the town's impact fees compare to others? Well, since each one is unique, a municipality can choose which impact fees to do, what method to do, but the basis for all impact fees are based on that municipality. What roads do they think will fail if it's a transportation? Or if it's a consumption basis, what is the value of their services that they provide? So it's hard to say that anyone else's would compare like to Mount Pleasant, what services we provide, and that level of service, and that's what drives our maximum allowable rates. Also, here you see some comparison. So for these different businesses, what we look at is what is their impact fee at 20% discount on the maximum allowable rate compared to a 50%, say, discount on the maximum allowable rate. In the purple or blue color, what you see is this business, what kind of other fees or taxes would they pay to the town? And then what we did is we compared the difference between the two, found that value, and then said, let's divide it by what other taxes or fees they would pay, and what would be a break even in number of years. This was also done for other activities. The newest one that was added in the comparison is a daycare center. That one was requested to look at, and so you can see at the 20% and the 50%, the taxes and what their break even would be. So one of the other things that has come up is about different discount rates. If the council decided they wanted to change the actual maximum allowable, we would go through the whole process. We'd go back to the planning commission and come through everything. What they can do during this ordinance is you do have the ability to change the discount rate. So when you look at the 4 different impact fees, you see whether it's residential per person or per square foot or even trip generations, what the maximum is, and then our current 20%, and then there are a couple other just options, the 35, 50, because they were in the original ordinance, and then I went ahead and did a 75, just so that you could see what that is. Now, to get more specific, as an example, what I'm showing here is I actually took transportation impact fees. It's based on trip generation. So you can see single-family dwelling, you can see it's $4,253 per house. That's based on 2.72 people, but the number of trips that a single-family house would generate, and then a shopping center and those pieces. So that just kind of gives you an example of one fee at various discount rates. And that's all I have for this, just to help you with your discussion.
Ms. Landy?
I'd like to start this discussion because we brought it to the Economic Development Committee and discussed it there, and there was a motion to move it towards council to discuss together. And the general discussion, this is actually a great slide to start on, although I'd like to back up to in a minute, but one of the things when this first came out, where we went from the 50% that we had for a number of years to the scaled up with the 35 and then 20 where we are, so that businesses and residential pay 80% of the impact fee, was because there was a lot of concern that impact, especially from residential properties coming into the town. We have more cars because we have more people living here and more school need. Everything is impacted, and that that it would slow down growth. But this is a good example. There's $3,400 that's essentially added to the cost of homes that are built or properties or units that are built. And here we already have a permit allocation and we have an apartment moratorium. So this discussion was in no way about trying to increase residential and decrease cost of bringing more residences to town. Quite the opposite, it's the other part, where you can clearly see we have many places, especially on the, I hate to say northern, but the more northern end of town, where there are a lot of services still lacking that we have a lot more of on this end of town, just because it's the newer part of town. And a good example would be we don't have, we only have one, well, I guess maybe have one or two child care centers. We don't have any fine dining north of IOP Connector. And we also don't have a lot of office buildings. So part of the thought here was when businesses that are considering coming here to bring jobs and services to our citizens, which, by the way, again, I would argue, as would a lot of other people, that it shortens car trips if you don't have to come down to this end of town. It also shortens car trips if you don't have to go over the bridge for all these things. So having it closer to where people actually live that don't have those services decreases the impact. And yet here we have something that costs so much money that it's keeping a lot of these things from coming. The argument has been made and pointed out correctly, I believe, several times that what we do have is more big box stores because they tend to be able to write the bigger checks and come on in. And so Lowe's and Costco and Home Depot and some of these have added a lot of impact fees to us over the last couple years. But in fact, what we'd really love to be able to do is bring some more of the smaller, more homegrown businesses and services that people want. So if you could go forward, back a few slides, and then I'll stop talking and see what else everybody else thinks. This one. So part of the reason for the break even, and I'd like to go to the one before, if we can. Okay, this one. So here we go, standalone fine dining. So what this shows, and what the calculation and the thinking here, and it may be obvious, but just in case it isn't, the break even is how long it would take by charging a lesser impact fee for a fine dining restaurant to come to town. And it would take 1.25 years for the difference to be made up of what the impact fee up front would have been. But that difference of $33,900 could actually be the difference between that restaurant coming here to Mount Pleasant versus not. But once they're here, and once they've been in business 1.25 years in this example, everything from then on is pure gravy. All of that revenue in the lavender color, or whatever that is, that comes to the town as ongoing revenue. And one of the biggest concerns we have in Mount Pleasant is for the longer term, we need to make sure that our revenue keeps up with the services we provide. And we know there's an issue with that for lots of reasons. So here, residential doesn't necessarily help that. It costs more, but commercial like this actually helps pay the bills. So the thought here was, okay, we've slowed residential down by doing several things. Why don't we take another look at commercial? And you can't do one without the other. But we feel in this case that perhaps by lowering the cost of the initial impact, that we will actually bring more revenue to the town, not to mention jobs and services.
I haven't heard a motion.
Oh, no, I was trying to see if anybody else, I have to make a motion. All right, well, I thought we can't discuss.
I mean, if you want to leave it that this is what the committee discussed and you were asked to bring it so we could discuss it, then it can go back or go to finance or something, but other than that,
I think
for lack of a motion, we're not just going to all...
No, I think we're prepared to make a motion.
Sorry, I'll make a motion. I would move that we change the traffic impact fee discount rate to 50% and the recreation discount rate to 5%, which means we would... And I just want to, somebody want a second?
I second that.
Okay. And I just want to explain it. So that's the discount rate. So the recreation fee, which is only charged to residences, they would be charged currently they're charged 80% of the allowable amount. And that would actually increase to 95%. And again, that's residences only because they're the only ones that are going to have kids in sports and all of that sort of thing. And then.
Let me just
Can I
interrupt
not?
you on a point of order.
Okay.
Just breaking news, or I'll let Mr. Pagliarini.
We're having trouble tonight. We don't have a written ordinance at this point, and I would just suggest that whatever it is you're going to request, and I understand the motion, to direct staff to prepare an ordinance to go through the process, because under our town ordinances, we have to have a written ordinance so that the public can review it prior to comment and discussion, so.
So I need to stop talking?
No, sir.
Maybe.
What I'm saying is, if you'd like to, instead of having a motion to actually take
So,
the action.
yeah, so I will amend my motion it would be to direct staff to write a motion, or write an ordinance, sorry. It would be direct staff to write an ordinance of those numbers. So 5% discount rate for recreation and a 50% discount rate for transportation. But I was just explaining that means that recreation increases to 95% because that's residences only. And then the traffic, which is applied equally to commercial and residential, decreases the amount that we're charging.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Huh? We had a second. Okay, we're in discussion. Mr. Santos.
I just want to make a statement. I know over the last couple of elections, everybody knows the number one thing that the citizens wanted was to slow the growth down. And so we did some things to do that, primary allocation, moratoriums, like you said, and impact fees. I think Mr. Blythe was dead on when he talked about it earlier. We haven't done anything to control the traffic. I mean, we got 41 on the books, but nothing has happened on 41. It's a parking lot every day. We got Billy Swales Boulevard, it's approved, we've got the funding for it, but we're in issues now because of the alignment of the road. Not a shovel has been put into the ground to help us with this traffic, and now we're gonna lower impact fees to attract more traffic. I mean, I think that we need to get what we said we were gonna do done, at least get it started before we start doing this to attract more traffic. That's just my opinion.
Mr. O'Rourke? Yes.
Two comments. First one is for my friend Councilman Santos. We actually did slow it down. And as a result of slowing it down, we got a bigger money problem than the money problem we had before. So I agree with everything transportation-wise and needing to fix all those things. But what Ms. Landing has put a lot of time into that I appreciate is a way to spur economic growth that would help. So I don't think it was about let's have the growth go. I think it's about helping the economic growth, which I'm kind of for. Second point, you sound sick. You feeling okay?
Allergies. Yes, sir. No fever. I've been to China.
Well, I wasn't checking to
Allergies.
see if you had the coronavirus. I was
Right.
just empathetic with you. Okay, can you help me with something? Because if I were in your shoes, I know that staff constantly does whatever we say to do. This looks like a lot of work if we change something. And the calculations, the going back and all that, would you help us recommend a time frame if this passed? Like when you bring the ordinance next time, we will be discussing passing it or not passing it. I would like to also have you provide for us at that time what a recommendation may be that of when this should start, I guess, and without kind of breaking the backs of everybody in here, like going really, really fast. So that's just a second thought.
It's going to depend. Changing this will change your proposed CIP. There are projects in there that are funded through the 5 years based on this funding.
Right.
So if we delay a year, then we'll work it out through the next CIP.
Yeah.
But if you want it to take effect sooner, then as part of doing the CIP, we are going to have to revisit transportation projects.
See, I think that information and information like that will help us as we make a decision. Because, you know, anything that's going to hurt us financially, I think is critical that we look at it. So thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Lanning.
Okay, a couple things. One is, again, I'm not trying to spur economic growth in the sense of, I mean, again, that terminology upsets people. I'm not asking, nor am I thinking we need to do that. What we need is businesses and services on this side of the bridge, and especially in the north end of town where there is a dearth of a lot of things. One of the reasons that a daycare center was put on here is because right now it is well known in Mount Pleasant. Any moms in the room, or even dads for that matter, probably can confirm, young moms and dads can confirm, you have to get on a waiting list sometimes 18 months before, which means well before you're even expecting. But certainly by the time you're expecting, if you actually want. Now that affects people's jobs. That affects people's ability to work. And where do you take your child if you can't get one? And right now, we have childcare centers that were built under the old regime in terms of costs, owners of which are saying, we would love to open more locations in other parts of Mount Pleasant, but we can't afford, we cannot make the numbers work because it's so expensive to do it. Is it more expensive is it more transportation and traffic if we had a childcare center closer in, like from what I understand, James B. Edwards' after-school program is completely booked and has like a 60-child waiting list right now. Is it more expensive to have a center right near that school, I'm just throwing that out, or to have people have to take children across the bridge somewhere? Which is more traffic? I think the closer you can bring businesses to where people live, the shorter the car trips. Not to mention, it does create ongoing revenue for the town. So I think the important thing here is to remember the distinction here. We're not trying to bring so many things to Mount Pleasant to overwhelm the community. Quite the opposite. We're trying to find ways to pay for things long-term and to bring the services that people need closer to where they live, which will help traffic. It will not hurt it. And one last thing on that. I don't think you see a lot of people that come from downtown or North Charleston or West Ashley to Mount Pleasant because we have, for instance, a Total Wine now. There's a Total Wine in West Ashley. But what you have, or Costco, but what you have is you have less people from here having to go over to West Ashley for Total Wine or Costco, any of those. So again, just thinking about how things work, I don't think this increases traffic. I think it actually helps shorten car trips.
All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Rambo.
Can you please back up a slide or two?
And
Okay,
let me
right.
remind everybody that at this point, we are not really debating the numbers and all. The motion is to direct staff to draft an ordinance. So we would have to see the ordinance first, and it would go through committee. So we can save ourselves a lot of time if we don't get off on our principal stance on impact fees and concentrate on what the motion is to direct staff on an ordinance on that. We haven't even seen the ordinance yet. But you have the floor. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, I still want it. So just really quickly, because I heard a kind of a gasp from some people when you said, oh, we'd have to revise the CIP because we'd be taking in less money for transportation projects. Well, if you look here, transportation, when the impact fees started ramping up, you had, when there was still a discount rate of 50%, we brought in $4.8 million in impact fees. The discount rate went to 35%, which means fees increased. And we actually brought in, guess what? Less money, $2.8 million. And it's even less than that if we look at FY 2020 so far. So by having higher fees, we're actually bringing in less money. So I just wanted to make that point.
Mr. Santos and I were on council when this was done. It was a laborious process. I would ask everybody to look at, and maybe staff can supply, if you don't already have it, the notebook. Wasn't it Stantec that did that?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And I say this over and over again. We did not set impact fees to be a membership dues to join the exclusive club of Mount Pleasant. We set that because Stantec gave us a cost of what each type of development cost on our infrastructure, paid for by our citizens. I thought at the time that the impact fee should have been 100% of what the known cost was, because that's not an arbitrary figure. That's what they brought to us. And I think we might have fixed some problems by now had we done that. I'm not at the point where I can just pick transportation and recreation and pick those numbers. So I'm not in favor of this at this point. I am in favor of having the conversation of how we fix the problem, but not particularly just all of a sudden picking two categories and two percentages at this point. Anyone else before we vote? All right, the motion is to direct staff to draft an ordinance to change the traffic impact fee to a discount rate of 50% and the recreation impact fee, which would actually raise it, to the discount rate of 5%. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
I believe there's 2 opposed. So the motion passes 7-2. So the process would be,
So we'll prepare an ordinance and we'll take that to committee.
which committee would that be? Finance?
Go to Finance Committee.
Finance Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
It'll go to Finance Committee. This brings us to item number 2, a resolution acknowledging 1200 Innovation Way as abandoned for 4 years.
Sir, I can enter the
Okay.
conversation on that if that's okay. Well, it's a benefit allowed by South Carolina state law for the work that's being done at the old Genfar building at Oakland Plantation. And it requires the town of Mount Pleasant to certify that that this is happening. And so it was supported at committee, and it's for council's approval here tonight.
I'll just answer questions. One thing I'd like to
You
do.
are?
I'm sorry, I'm Mark Taylor, I'm the owner's representative. I'm
Okay.
one of the owners of the former Genfar building. I would also like to ask council to please refer to it as Innovation Way now. We're trying to eliminate the word Genfar from our lexicon.
That's fair.
Very fair. I think that's out at the shops at Oakland.
That's it.
And near a certain cigar shop that I may or may not frequent, and other businesses as well. Is there any dispute or discussion that this has been abandoned for 4 years? I mean, we're voting on something, we just want to make sure that there's solid proof. I could vouch anecdotally that it seems abandoned, but.
I started with the U.S. Attorney 9 years ago trying to buy it. And other than Dr. Dong and his wife and a few engineers, I'm the only person that was in it till we purchased it.
Okay. Is there a motion, please? Go ahead.
Make a motion, we approve.
Second.
A motion to approve acknowledging 1200 Innovation Way as abandoned for 4 years. We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Resolution 20032.
Thank you very much. Hope we weren't too tough on you. All right. Item number 3, a resolution authorizing a law enforcement assistant and support agreement between Mount Pleasant and the Horry County Sheriff's Office.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Chief.
Resolution 20031.
Item number 4 is first reading of an ordinance to provide for the issuance of a sale of 8.16 million general obligation bond, general obligation refunding bond. Would that be you?
Yes, sir. To start with, anyway, the town has an opportunity to refund the 2010 general obligation bond and issue one bond to one bank. And we're anticipating a savings of over $200,000 over the next 5 years. Paul Trush is our bond counsel, and he's here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Yeah, again, Paul Trush. I would just say, Marcy, I think that estimated interest rate we tried to be conservative. Now it's very conservative. I think obviously if you're in the market today, and we're not, probably be below 1%. But we think net of all costs, you should conservatively save about $250,000 over 5 years. Perhaps more.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Kotov laid it out in a memo.
It's really based on market conditions. We can strike now, refinance a bond, and be able to return some to the town.
All right, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
That's first reading ordinance number 20023.
And then number 5 is the first reading to adopt an appropriate budget for the town of Mount Pleasant. And let me just ask for clarity's sake, and for those watching at home, this is without amendments at first reading. As I understand, this is the budget as proposed initially to council. It does not include any discussion or debate that occurred at Budget Committee, because those have not been incorporated. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this is you hate to say a formality, I mean, it's first reading of an ordinance, but it gets us a first reading of a budget. Then we can begin making whatever amendments if council so desires. Is everybody clear on that? All right. Do we have a motion, please?
Make a motion on the proposed budget to approve and adopt the appropriate budget for the town of Mount Pleasant for fiscal year 2021.
Second.
We have a motion to approve first reading, and we have a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I know we have had a lot of comments here tonight about recreational issues and how we fund recreational issues. And I just want to make everyone aware that we just heard what great rates we have right now. And I'm going to be bringing a proposed referendum for recreation to try to solve some of the problems in the amount of somewhere in the neighborhood of $75 million over 25 years. And just letting people know, because that might cure some of the issues that we've had, and I think we can do it. If we're ever going to do it with interest rates the way they are today, now's the time to do it.
Got it. All right, the motion is to approve. This is item number 5, which is the ordinance to adopt the budget for fiscal year 2021. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
First reading ordinance number 20024.
Item B, old business, final reading of an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances, Section 30.35B.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. This is only moving back the deadline for council members to place items on the agenda from Thursday to Wednesday, which gives staff and the public more time to prepare for our meeting the following Tuesday. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Final reading ordinance number 20016.
This brings us to section C, which would be executive session. If there is a motion, it would be for the items listed, legal and contractual, personnel, appointments to legal and contractual has to do with town's legal representation. Personnel is applications to Planning Commission, Historic District Preservation Commission, Construction Board of Adjustments, Cultural Arts Pride Commission, Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee, and the Farmers Market Advisory Board. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the reasons just stated?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Before we vote, allow me to announce that council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed on an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. All in favor of the motion to enter into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are in executive session. The motion passes.
Safer here, probably.
8:30.
It's lonely in Montana in some areas.
Oh, yeah.
So my ex-wife's still there.
Oh, really? I love these people. I mean, when you first go there.
Yeah. It's been 30 days with me, we did some snow training, some winter training, for this special forces group. Yeah. And Buddy, I think is gonna spend freezing. Goes from India to November to the first part of December. Great training, flew by.
Got to say, man.
Oh,
It'd take you a month to thaw out.
And tell us how to survive. Just had 3 of the special forces parachuted in to meet us. Had to be medevac out. There was a snow drift that covered up with a fence. And we're pale and we're fence posts. And we're a branch.
Air assault guys?
What's
Was it
that?
the air assault guys?
No,
or-
no, these are special forces. Being raised, they were coming to train with us. We were training together for that month.
Was it the legs or? Ugh.
Yep, they all survived. And it was
Yeah, it's gruesome, yeah.
great training. I mean, we did everything from head off the land and shoot claymores, set them up, blast them out. I mean, we just had a hell of a
Yeah,
time.
but that got cold.
Oh,
That's
freezing.
just.
Oh, we had gear though. We had these bunny boots, these huge looking moon boots, and a special mask we wore over our face, with a face warm. You know, we taught our buddies kept up to check us, we checked noses
Noses and ears and stuff
just to
like
make
that.
sure we were doing okay. It was cold, man. It was
You do
nice
Eskimo
training.
kisses.
It was cold. I mean, they kept telling you that you had to sleep in bed, you didn't sleep in your clothes, because they had those extreme weather bands.
Right.
If you sweat, then you freeze.
Right.
It was interesting. Good training.
Glad you did it.
Yes, I think we're good. I'm cutting my guy loose. I think that works out. Having him grab it and hand to you, instead of trying to collect it. I was thinking through it. If we collect it, then you got a stack of who's who.
Yeah.
So I think that worked out okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yep, I like it.
Because it's really difficult to find somebody to help with that
Nope,
desk.
nope, I like it. And with the mayor making the announcement ahead of time. Oh. I got you, but then this worked out because then you were able to pass them out. And it seemed like it was more orderly. So they weren't randomly handing things out. It went okay.
Send stuff to me in advance so I could get it to
Of
them rather
course,
than have
of
them
course.
come hand pieces of paper out.
And it's a shame, well, maybe y'all could put that out. I don't know how you can go about doing that, but
Everyone listens.
this is a better process than we've had.
Yeah.
It did work.
Yeah, well, I think it was fine as long as your guy is willing to do it, or girl, whoever it is.
They have no choice. Really?
Is that a new?
Yeah, they've added this to me now. Because
Well, that looks a little less intrusive than the other.
this actually, no, it's right now acting as my ligament. Because when they really, the whole story reconstructed, they put the tendon here, the thumb's not anchored properly, so it's loose. So when I try to do something out of this one, I can't hold it, it drops. Now I can do it because this holding my thumb in place. It's ridiculous. And this is lifelong. John, so she said, take it off when you want to, and when you're out active, you need to wear it. My son of a bitch. This guy can't win. Can't win. Yep.
Was that more comfortable than the other one you were wearing?
Not really.
No? It just looks, because it's slim, I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
it's
as
just
big
slimmer.
as the other one, but.
I did ask for blue for the thin blue line. I said, hook me up, Doc.
Black and blue.
Yeah. All right. See you later.
All right, see you tomorrow. What's up?
I'm tired.
We need to hurry up, because my Fitbit says it's time for bed.
That Fitbit, you rely on your Fitbit.
I do, when it says it's time to wind down for bed, Mayor, I'm starting.
I've got 30 minutes to get ready.
You getting your shot? Yeah, I think I'm gonna make 10,000 today.
So the third one went out again.
Okay.
I think that's the same one we were having problems with before. They tried wiggling the cord, but it wouldn't, never did come back on.
That's gonna be great.
They come back. They're not coming back anytime soon.
When I'm here like that, that's gonna be fantastic.
When I go back there, you have 3 minutes.
Can you see it?
Nope.
We must have a short in it or something.
I'm gonna fall asleep down here.
Don't climb around under there. Have one of the IT guys look at it.
Just wanna fall asleep.
You want a pillow? I have a pillow.
I just wanna feel a little.
I have a little foam pillow you can have.
No, I'm gonna try to see if I can get up.
Do you need some help?
What?
You need some help.
No, I'm good.
Oh, watch your head.
Very elegant. Oh, gosh.
Wait, turn around.
Very.
Oh, you should have climbed under there.
I know, it's like,
I didn't
God,
think
it's
about
being
that.
beat to me. Where did I leave my phone? I'm a total mess.
No.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what was going on.
This monitor went out.
Which one?
That's Brenda's. So she was trying to jiggle the cord and see if she could come back on. It's still hot. It's been off most of the meeting. So. I think that's the same one we were having problems with before. So I think they need to come out and fix it.
Yes.
Yep.
This is that out. Personal.
Is it? She was pointing at.
Just that, I think that's the same one that went out before. We had a problem with one before. So, let's see if I can get it fixed before the next meeting.
Yeah. here. It's freezing in here.
Should we just do them of these? I feel like I have 3 now. Bag.
Christina left that piece of paper back there. The one with the one I'm not gonna nominate.
That's what it's there for. Town event, any town events.
Yeah, farmer's market.
Farmers market. Look official. Yeah, anytime you go to like a ribbon cutting.
Yeah,
or-
oh, did you, yes, thank you so much.
What is an event where-
Howard got me.
Newbie.
Howard, you're so good.
You're such a newbie. Oh,
No, mic's on. Rookie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've been trying to cough back there.
We have reconvened from executive session. No action was taken, no votes were conducted. However, as noticed beforehand, we may take action if any motion follows based on any information that was received during executive session. Is there a motion concerning
Mr. Mayor, I
item
have-
number 1? Yes.
I have a motion. I move to give 6 months' notice of termination of the town's contract for legal representation with HMP and to move toward the general counsel form of representation and continue negotiations to provide transition services to the new general counsel model.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. We are in discussion. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
3 opposed? Santos? Chapman? Okay. By a 6-3 vote, the motion passes. Section number 2 is personnel. Are there any nominations for people to fill any of the seats on these commissions and boards, please?
Mayor.
Yes.
I make a notion that we nominate Ms. Jan McNair to the Farmers Market Advisory Board.
We have a nomination for Jan McNair to the Farmers Market Advisory Board. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Next.
I would like to move to reappoint Corey Alston and Kelly Traeger to CAP, and then also to appoint Brad Dunnels to the Culture, Arts, and Pride Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to appoint those 3 to CAP? No, any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have 3 new appointees. Next.
I would also like to move to appoint Brumley McLeod to the Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of the nomination, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next.
I move to reappoint Kathy Smith to the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Are there any other appointments? Is there any other business to come before this council? There being none, we stand adjourned.
Today.
I want to do it today.
We don't have a year, man.
We don't. Oh, nothing.
And it's what time?
Ready.
Counselor?
It's a little tiny
10 till
letters,
10.
and now they've got bigger letters.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
It's better, it's better. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. Ooh, Mike is on another scene.
I trust him. She's always
That's what I would do. I did it with you.